Whether you are just getting started or gearing up to head to the Ashlands to face Catlon, you're probably going to be using leather armor in one way or another. For this guide, we're going to be taking a look at the use cases and the value of each piece of leather armor. The only exclusions will be pieces of armor which qualify as headgear. Those will be covered in a different video. To begin, we're going to cover the Drifter's leather boots and discuss the different statistics that each armor piece will have. The first thing that you'll notice here is the quality rating. It's masterwork. We're going to be working with masterwork pieces so that we can see each armor piece at its highest potential. Moving down, we're going to have the armor class here, and then leather to the right is going to be the armor type. Things can get a little bit blurry with these two labels. I wouldn't pay a lot of attention to them because what's really going to matter are the statistics beneath these two labels. First, you'll have blunt resistance. Blunt resistance is very straightforward. Let's say your character takes 100 blunt damage and these Drifter's leather boots block the attack. You will be protected from 26 points of blunt damage. Cut resistance is where things get a little bit more complicated, but really it's just adding another step to the damage calculation. Let's say you're to take 100 points of cut damage. These Drifter's boots block some of the damage. You would not block 41%. Instead, you'll want to multiply that 41% by the cut resistance efficiency modifier to figure out what the true cut resistance percentage is. So in this case, we multiply that 41% by that 60%, we're going to end up at around 25% cut resistance. So in all, the character takes 100 cut damage and they're wearing these boots, they're going to block around 25 points of damage. Harpoon resistance is also very important. This is going to determine how much projectile resistance a piece of armor has. This is going to apply to both crossbows and harpoons. If your harpoon resistance is high enough, certain pieces of armor, you may find you take hardly any damage at all. And then of course, when dealing with harpoons and turrets, having some resistance here is important to ensure characters are not KO'd by projectile damage. The weight value is self-explanatory. Here in this case it's 1 kilogram. That's hardly anything. That's good. Then you'll have your value, cell value. The values in the coverage section will determine what percentage chance a piece of armor has of blocking an attack. So when we were calculating damage earlier, we were assuming that we won this coverage roll. The coverage roll here is 40%. 40% of the time, when we're hit on the right leg, these Drifter's boots will block, and their statistics will factor into the damage calculation. 60% of the time, the Drifter's boots won't have an impact, and there would just be no influence on the calculation. Then the final piece here is the skill section. This will identify if armor provides a buff or a debuff to certain attributes. Generally, leather armor is going to provide attribute boosts as opposed to debuffs, and heavy armor will debuff abilities rather than buff them. There are a couple exceptions to that, and this is an exception here. So there is a 90% stealth attribute modifier with these Drifter's boots. Here's the thing though, with Drifter's leather boots. They may only have 40% coverage, but for armor options for boots, well, for one, there aren't that many options, and for two, these statistics here are actually quite good for that category, for that armor slot. Now that we've captured all the numbers that we're seeing up here, we can move into evaluating each different type of leather armor. The Assassin's Rags are a tricky case. You see, they offer a wide array of buffs, including a whopping 1.3x bonus to the assassination skill. The trouble is what you give up in order to get those buffs. First, there isn't any left arm coverage. While that's not the end of the world, what is problematic is the 25% chest coverage. Yup, that's right. The most likely to be hit vital part of the body only has 25% coverage with this armor piece. On top of that, I don't like that the stomach only has 50% coverage. Then you have this weird +8 to melee attack and -4 to melee defense going on. Really, taking all this into account, the Assassin's Rags do have a clear niche. If you have a stealth character, who is ideally a martial artist too, and or a crossbow unit, then this armor is a possible fit for them. All other types of characters, though, should steer clear of this armor piece. I'd say that the Drifter's Leather Jacket is one of my go-to options for my light armor characters when I'm getting a playthrough started. You have decent blunt and cut resistance with 100% chest and stomach. Good to see, it's what I like to see. And the +5 to melee defense is nice to have. What you sacrifice is right arm coverage, with it being just a mere 25%. But if you have to give up coverage for a body part, then arm protection is what you'd prefer to go with, rather than a vital organ. Generally, what happens during my campaigns is some of my characters wear Drifter's Leather Jackets up until the point that they can be upgraded to some other armor. Drifter's Leather Jackets are cheaper than other light armor, so they're likely going to be the most cost-effective way to give your characters chest and stomach protection in the early game. Then if you have characters that maybe they use crossbows, you might have them wear Drifter's Leather Jackets for quite a while. So ninja rags, which really are the primary alternative to the assassin's rags, are pretty good, with one main caveat, I'd say. While the coverage numbers do look promising, they have a paltry 50% cut resistance. So even at masterwork grade, they're only going to block around 20% of the cut damage you receive. Don't get me wrong though, I respect all those ability buffs. Overall, these buffs end up giving the assassin's rags a run for its money, and since the ninja rags have way better chest and stomach protection, I'd feel more confident about my stealth and ranged characters wearing this instead of the assassin's rags. Ultimately, if you have characters who aren't melee oriented and use mostly stealth or ranged, the ninja rags end up being a pretty good option. I suppose another alternative for stealth or ranged characters would be to use the swamp ninja rags, which are another variant of the ninja rags that you'll see being worn by swamp ninjas. These trade off most of the stat buffs that the regular ninja rags offer in exchange for dust storm and gas protection. In my opinion, the trade-offs are just not worth it. You'd have to be living in the desert for this piece to make practical sense, which is a bit ironic because they're called swamp ninja rags. Anyhow, 9 times out of 10, the regular ninja rags will be a better fit for your characters. I wouldn't go out of your way to purchase or craft these unless you need gas and dust storm protection. Moving along, we have an armor piece that I quite like, the Mercenary Leather Armor. Something that you'll notice about this piece is that it is in the medium armor class and the leather class. Being a part of the medium armor class, it has a higher cut resistance percentage at 58%. This will be among the highest you'll see for armor that you can make with a leather crafting bench. What this means is that early and mid game, this is oftentimes going to be the best armor that you can make, but you don't have the techs available yet for heavy or chainmail armor. And with that high cut resistance, you're not adding to the weight very much at all. The weight is still 4 kilograms. It's just, I would say that compared to heavy armor, the harpoon resistance is a bit lower than what you would see for heavy armor. And this is leather after all, so it wouldn't make much sense if the harpoon resistance were higher. The coverage attributes are quite good. At 100% chest coverage is what we're looking for. 70% stomach is alright. And then 80% for both the arms, that's also alright. What would stop you from putting this piece on every character you have are the debuffs here. So stealth, crossbows, dodge, martial arts, they're all going to take a hit from wearing this armor. But for any characters who aren't using those debuff stabilities, it's fair game. I'd say this is a solid piece of armor for them to wear, especially in the early and mid game. And there is another piece, the Conscript Leather Armor, which has a lot of similarities with the Mercenary Leather Armor. This armor will have a lighter color, it'll have a higher blunt resistance, but lower cut resistance. It's going to have the same weight though, cheaper value, the same coverage for each body part, and then the same debuffs as well. So overall, you're just looking at a very similar armor piece. And the same thing applies to Conscript Leather Armor. If you have a character that is going into stealth, using crossbows, or is a martial artist, then they're probably not going to want to wear this. Anyone else, though, this armor piece is fair game. Before we head into what most would consider to be the best light upper body armor in the game, we have the Trader's Leathers. Trader's Leathers are exactly what you think they'd be. Basic armor for traders to wear. By extension, Trader's Leathers aren't going to be your go-to armor pick if you have other options. Even so, Trader's Leathers are great to craft and sell for profit. Compared to other upper body leather pieces, their crafting time doesn't take as long, and they only weigh 2 kilograms, so even if you don't have a pack animal, they're easy to transport to vendors. Rounding off our upper body armor section, we have the Dustcoat and the Longcoat. It is no secret that the Dustcoat and the Longcoat are often the favorite kinds of light armor for Kenshi players. This is due to them having excellent coverage, significant stat buffs, and a whopping amount of acid protection. Each of these armor types has a sleeveless variant too, but we'll set those aside since they are essentially weaker versions of the sleeve versions, with a few quirks here and there, but ultimately you're going to want to go with the sleeved versions. Compared to each other, it would be fair to say that the Dustcoat is an upgrade from the Longcoat. However, you have to keep in mind that it's going to be harder to get the crafting blueprint for the Dustcoat compared to the Longcoat. The most noticeable differences between the Longcoat and the Dustcoat are that the Dustcoat has increased burn resistance, a slight increase to cut and blunt protection, 4+ to martial arts, and a 1.1x buff to stealth. Simply put, you'd be well served by equipping either one of these armor types. And if you have to choose between the two, the Dustcoat is going to be the way to go. The burn resistance offered by the Dustcoat allows characters to travel in Venge without being afraid of the sky lasers, and if your stealth characters want more protection than the Ninja Rags have to offer, a Dustcoat is a healthy alternative. Special shout out to that 60% leg protection, which especially comes in handy for light armor characters who aren't going to be wearing heavy armor for the lower body. For this next section, we're going to be getting into shirts and undershirts, and they're very straightforward. Shirts are a crucial second layer of armor which provide chest and stomach coverage most importantly. As an added layer, they can either supplement upper body armor or make up for deficits in upper body armor. For most people, depending on how in-depth you want to go with min-maxing, leather turtlenecks are going to be the most well-rounded option that most characters should have if possible. This is because leather turtlenecks provide excellent coverage without having any kind of stat debuff. The main problem with leather turtlenecks, and this is going to be true for other shirts as well, is that their price and their crafting times are very high. This often means that looting them from enemies makes more sense than spending days crafting them. To touch quickly on some of the inferior light armor shirts, you're going to have the leather vest, certainly serviceable, definitely better than nothing, but it doesn't provide full chest coverage. A step above the leather vest is the leather shirt, and this is essentially just an upgrade which has more coverage than a leather vest. From there, 1 degree higher is the dark leather shirt that you may have seen. You may have noticed these kind of pieces in particular since their value is much higher than the other shirts, even that of leather turtlenecks. This is due to dark leather shirts providing a 1.1x stealth boost along with a slight buff and blunt resistance. Are these upgrades worth the cost? Definitely not. But if you want to pack on a stealth boost to one of your characters, the dark leather shirt is a worthy choice for that. Still a great piece of armor. And last, we have the leather hive vest, which is pretty decent. It's going to be the only leather shirt that hivers can wear. They won't be able to wear the shirts that humanoids can wear. And this piece is pretty straightforward. The stats are going to be just about the same compared to the leather shirt. You're sacrificing arm coverage, but you're not giving up chest and stomach coverage. And I say sacrificing, but you can't make a hiver wear a regular shirt. They would have to wear this leather piece of armor. So you pretty much have to just wear what's available, and this piece is all right. Notably though, the value is quite a bit lower than the leather shirt, so it's going to be easier to pick one of these up at a store. But my experience has been when you're visiting hive villages, their leather vests are not that high of quality, so you're best off finding the blueprint and crafting these on your own if you really want one. And for the leather armor crafting bench, there's going to be 2 lower body armor options aside from the Drifter's boots. There will be samurai cloth pants and Drifter's leather pants. Both of these are great options for lower body coverage. Most folks are going to go with the samurai cloth pants because of the better coverage stats, but the Drifter's leather pants do have a 10% acid protection and just overall better cut and blunt resistance. Personally, there is a special place in my heart for the Drifter's leather pants because I like the 10% acid resistance. In the vast majority of cases, lower body armor doesn't offer any kind of environmental protection, but this is a case where you do get 10%. Also, the Drifter's leather pants are dirt cheap, so they are going to be the most cost-effective way for your characters to get leg protection early in the game. If we move on to the Samurai cloth pants here, you'll see that they have 100% coverage for both legs, in addition to coverage for the stomach. And that's where the Samurai cloth pants shine. They are consistent. Their cut and blunt resistance is not high, but it is significant. It's going to be very helpful. They are just a well-rounded armor piece, and also they don't look too bad with most other sets. In all, I would say that leather armor in Kenshi is quite good, especially if you want to prevent your characters from being over-encumbered by their armor, or you want them to have stat buffs instead of debuffs. Leather armor is great for that. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for tuning in. If you want to see more guides like this one, be sure to like and comment. I look forward to making the next video. Take it easy.